Hey guys, welcome back to Prospect Central 101. So this is going to be part two of our Lions preview. So unfortunately, we had to let Sam go for a little bit. I think he's going to end up coming back for another one of the later parts. So joining me for part two, we have Keelan and Grayson once again, and we're going to start off this time with defense. So we already went over the offense in part one with the exception of O-line. So is there anything you guys just want to say to kind of wrap that up? I know we had to kind of cut out real quick, but is there any final point that you really wanted to make, or just real quick
Mm,
before we move on to D?
Not really, for me personally.
No, I was good.
Okay, cool. So yeah, we unfortunately didn't get the chance to talk much about the offensive line, but we'll probably get to that in the season predictions at the end, a little bit more in detail. So we're going to move straight on then to the defensive side of the ball. And we're going to start by moving in order of like front to back. So starting with defensive tackles. So Keilan, we'll start with you on this one. What do you think about the Lions' defensive tackle depth with Shelton, Williams, Penasini in hand?
It's probably one of our weaker positions, to be honest with you. Williams, I mean, he was pretty decent with Chicago, if I remember correctly, but he was nothing really special. Danny Shelton, a big, 340-pound nose tackle, big run stuffer, coming from the Patriots. I like him. And John Penasini, kind of similar to Shelton. I mean, he's big, he's a good run defender. He plowed through double teams in college like it was nothing. And you know, as a I think it was a sixth or seventh round rookie, I
Yes,
expect
sixth
him.
round.
Yeah, I mean, he's pretty good. This could definitely use improvement. I mean, Hand is probably our best guy there. He's got the pass rush upside. He's a pretty good run defender. I mean, if I remember correctly, he's been hurt quite a bit. So it'd be nice to see him stay healthy. But I mean, other than that, it's I don't know. I'd probably call it a below average group personally.
Yeah, so just a little quick note before you start, Grayson. For those of you guys who don't know, the little number next to is what round they were drafted in and what year they were drafted in. So,
Oh,
for example,
fascinating.
Tennessee is 2020 draft round six.
Huh. Did not know that
So
was
that's
true.
if they were drafted by that team. So, like for example, Williams UFA from Chicago and so on. So, with that said, I just want to make that quick note for the people who didn't understand that. Grayson, what are your thoughts specifically on Williams? Obviously, you're a little bit more familiar with him than either of us would be.
Yeah, so I like Williams. He was probably third string guy. You're behind a stud like Akeem Hicks. There's not much you could do. But looking at everything as a whole, I don't think it's got the highest amount of talent. But if you and especially a defensive tackle, it might be the only position in the entire game that you can do it for, where you just kind of throw out a body and tell them to block whatever holes you can. You've got, in my opinion, some solid bodies. I don't know if they're very talented. I don't know if they'll be very good, but they will take up a lot of space on the line. They will make
Right.
the other team's offensive line work. They may not get a lot of tackles. They might let guys through sometimes, but they're good bodies, if that means anything. Trying to be positive with it, um,
Yeah.
but that is definitely a position that is going to be worse from last year.
Well, right, especially with the bodies part, especially with Penasini and Shelton both being like you know really big guys who are specialized in the run defense.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see because unfortunately, Hand has the injury issues. Pengasini is a day three, as much as we might like him or think he has the upside and so on. He is a day three rookie in COVID year, so he probably won't get a lot of work. You're going to have to rely really heavily, especially initially, on these two guys here in Williams and Shelton. That's probably going to be our base four front package. Now, we do play quite a bit of three front packages as well. Of course, Shea is a part of that at defensive end, and we have Romeo for some rotational usage, so he'll get some time instead of instead of Williams. But I think the biggest thing for me there is going to be kind of that depth aspect in terms of like what happens if Deshaun Hand goes down. We're basically forced into playing Nick Williams the entire rest of the game. So from that element, that's probably the main thing that concerns me the most. Is just making sure that we have a comfortable rotation of guys. Specifically, that Arizona Cardinals game freaks me out. I am not looking forward to playing Arizona this year uh, with this little defensive line depth. Uh,
Yep.
it's going to be some tough matchups for us. Now we do have the talent. Uh, Getting a little bit ahead of ourselves here. Trey Flowers is obviously one of the best edge defenders in the league. Shelton has a lot more upside to be better than what Snacks was for us last year, along with Ashawn, who was abysmal last year, and Mike Daniels, who played, 5 games at most.
Yeah.
So there's probably a little bit more of that potential to be better than what we had last year, but that doesn't really say a whole lot given the guys who ended up playing most of the year after coming for injuries. So,
Can I just back to what you said about like if Hand goes down? That if Hand goes down,
again,
it's really unfortunate because you're gonna see Romeo and Williams on the field a lot more than they need to be. So the depth is a question, and especially if we lose someone to injury, who's gonna replace them? Like I think we got Kevin Strong on the practice
practice
squad.
squad. Yep.
We got Jason
Frank Herring is
Cornell
on the practice
on
squad too.
IR. That's right. But we don't really have any options to replace someone if they do get hurt. And with the depth being already so weak, we're gonna have to see Nick Williams or Romeo Quar splitting time there.
Yeah, and for a 3-man front too, I mean, you're not going to put 2 guys out there. So for the rest of
Right.
the game, unless we have Panasini active or whatever, he'll probably be rotating with Shelton for the most part anyway.
Yeah.
For the rest of the game, if him were to get injured like in the middle of like the second quarter, basically the entire second half, you're putting either Romeo or Williams on the field.
Yeah. Exactly.
So yeah, that is not exactly my favorite position. Now I do like the guys we have, and if he's able to stay healthy, is through the roof ceiling. Nick Williams has the potential to grow and develop, especially with Bo Davis. Danny Shelton is a good defensive tackle when he's on the field. It's just, man, the lack of guys behind them is not something that I'm excited about. I like Panasini, but Panasini is really there to kind of be that guy who gives Shelton rest. He's not really there to be your starter. Uh,
Yeah.
and same thing with Okwara. He's probably going to be that guy that gets Hand rest or Williams rest to kind of be that rotational piece. Beyond that, yikes. So I guess let's talk a little bit about just Trey Flowers and Okwara here, who are going to be probably the main edge rushers in terms of pass rush for this team. Grayson, we'll start with you on this one. What do you think about Trey Flowers' uh, potential to be in that top group of pass rushers this year once again?
Yeah, I was skeptical when they got him. I always worry about getting former Patriots. Even if you have a guy like Matt Patricia who's from the Patriots scheme and everything like that, it is just risky business that they come over and perform at the same level. And he definitely did not disappoint. I could see easily another double-digit sack season. Very, very talented pass rusher.
Yeah.
Keelan, any other thoughts?
Well, I love him. He's a really good run stopper for being an edge rusher or a 5 tech, 5 or 7 tech. He's a tremendous run stopper. He's still a pretty good pass rusher. Obviously, he's not going to be like a top 5 guy in terms of pass rush.
Well, maybe pass rush, but yeah, he's not really much of a sack guy.
Right.
But in terms of pressures, he's going to
Yeah.
be up there again.
Yeah, and he's
What you
still a
saying?
really good guy, and he obviously fits this scheme tremendously. And he's one of my favorite guys to watch.
Yeah, so like I was saying a little bit, sorry to interrupt you there, Keelan, but
Oh
Flowers
yeah,
not really going to be much of the sack guy, maybe 5 or so sacks, but what he'll really do for this team once again is really just bring that pressure, specifically that power rush and collapse that pocket. It's going to be really big for this team, especially with the secondary that we have. Just making sure that we limit those escapes, those the pocket escapes, whatever you want to call them, evading pressure, so on and so forth. Just really keeping those quarterbacks in the pocket,
he's gonna be
especially
a
when we go up against more mobile quarterbacks, like
exactly.
we will maybe see this year later on in the season. Uh,
Yep.
if we make the playoffs, maybe Seattle with Russell Wilson comes to mind in particular. So
Well, I
uh,
mean, we have Arizona coming up, and
Kyler
he's gonna
Murray
be a
again.
crucial piece against Kyler Murray. That's exactly what I was gonna say. You know, I don't know. I can't remember our schedule exactly. I don't know if we have, Baltimore or Houston on the schedule. I don't think we do, but
We have Houston, not
oh,
Baltimore.
right.
Yep,
But
and AFC South. So Rivers, Minshew, uh,
um,
Watson, and Ryan Tannehill.
Tannehill. Yep. So he's gonna be, he's an important part setting the edge, like you said, against the mobile quarterbacks, and that's one of the things he does best.
Cool. So, Grayson, what are your thoughts on Julian Okwara? Personally, I'm not really the biggest fan of him. I don't know how much tape you were able to watch of his this offseason, but what do you think about his potential impact in Detroit this year?
Yeah, so not super familiar, but if I remember correctly, and it's very possible that I am not remembering correctly, but he was projected to go a lot higher than where he went. He was one of those guys who kind of slid. I'm not talking, a crazy drop or anything, but I remember, or think I remember, that he was supposed to go much earlier than he did. So he could be
Yeah,
a nice little steal. It could be, oh, he slid for a reason.
right.
But I'm not super familiar with him. It is nice for him to at least be behind Trey Flowers, and it's hard to get a guy who's I think he's still under 30, to groom, yeah, 27 to groom a guy. But it's a talented person to be behind.
Keelan?
And he's not even really gonna be backing up Flowers, to be honest with you.
Well, he
He's a
will be
guy.
because we're going to have to use him differently, but he will be our primary
Yeah.
backup to Flowers.
I mean, he's not a guy who can play like he doesn't play similarly to Flowers. He's gonna be an important piece with Austin Bryant on pup. He's a potential to be a really good jack. He's a terrific speed rusher, but he lacks qualities to be a good run stopper, especially day one,
Mhm.
which is why he probably fell. He was, I guess, expected to be a second round pick, fell to the third round. He just really doesn't have much of a run stopping game yet.
Yeah, so yeah, for the most part, Grayson, you were remembering correctly. It was projected to go in that second round range, ended up falling to the third. But you were also right when you hinted that was for a reason, potentially. And that reason is his run defense. It is not good. It's the main reason why I'm not the biggest fan of him. Obviously, it's going to bring a little bit more to the pass rush than we had last season. Probably a bit better of a pass rusher, even day one, than Devon Kennard was. Uh, but yeah, the drop off between Kennard and him in terms of run D is pretty dramatic. Kennard's not like Von Miller or anything either. But yeah, so that'll be interesting to kind of watch and see what he's able to develop,
Yep.
particularly behind one of the linebackers who will be starting for us, who's also from Chicago, and Christian Jones. So it appears it's going to be our
Exactly.
starting two down Jack this year.
Mhm.
So, Keelan, you probably at this point, maybe, know a little bit more about my thoughts on Christian Jones. So I'll let you start with this one.
Well, he's an interesting player, and you know, I like him more in the jack role, like we've talked about numerous times in our many group chats. I like him more in the jack role than like a typical linebacker like
Sam Will.
Jared Davis, and you know
Is
let
that
him
all?
focus. Let him focus on getting to the football, rushing the passer, and hopefully he'll exceed in that more so than being the worst player on the team.
Okay, Grayson, you probably heard me complain about Christian Jones a couple of times. What do you think about his potential move to a more on the line role instead of being that kind of off ball linebacker?
I think it's good. I did like him when he was in Chicago. Granted, I liked him behind Danny Trevathan and
Brandon Marshall?
oh no, the other one we had from
Kwiatkowski?
the Colts. I can't even think of his name right now.
Oh, Wheeler?
But I don't know. It was years ago, just a couple, but enough for me to forget. I could pull it up if I really had to, but I can't find it just real quick. But oh yeah, it was Jarrell Freeman, and we still had a guy like Sam
Oh,
Acho. That third linebacker, and then we got Roquan Smith and Kwiatkowski. So the Bears always have those linebackers that he's probably a totally different player than what he's shown on the Bears as their third guy in. It is, from what I've heard from you guys who aren't fans of really any of the linebackers, if I remember correctly, any change might be a good change just because it sounded like they needed it.
yeah. So
Into Vi
basically,
we
what happened
trust.
is last year he was kind of put in a difficult position. This isn't even all entirely on Patricia either, where he basically had to be our second linebacker behind Jared Davis. Because Sifai wasn't quite ready yet, and with our scheme as complex and difficult as it is, it took him until after mid-season to really pick it up uh, and kind of be a more of a role player factor there. So he really was basically our second linebacker last year, and we had Kennard and Jack. So for the most part, he was going to be, along with Jared Davis, our pursuit and our cover linebacker. And Christian Jones is not good in coverage. He cannot cover the middle of the field. And he also is not particularly athletic in terms of making plays sideline to sideline. And that's basically what he had to do last year. Now, there were a couple of exceptions to that. We played him a little bit more online versus Green Bay. I talked about this in the group chat when it happened. This was the Monday night game, the game that we lost to the hands of the face calls. Uh, we played him a little bit more online against Green Bay's offense in the outside zone that LaFleur likes throwing with Aaron Jones. And it worked. It wasn't good. It wasn't great. It wasn't spectacular. It didn't shut him down. Obviously, he was able to get, I think, that one really long touchdown run. But it worked. So there's a little bit of hope there that maybe he can kind of improve, and even more so with the coaching change. Our linebacker coach last year was Al Golden, who was a former tight ends coach who I think used to play tight end when he was in high school or college. I don't remember, but he was the guy who was basically our tight end coach when we had Eric Ebron. And then we decided it would be a great idea to move him to linebackers coach. And Jared Davis fell off a cliff, and Christian Jones sucked, and Tahir Whitehead regressed significantly before he went
Oh
to, I believe it was
man,
Vegas.
Oakland, but yeah,
Yeah,
Raiders.
and now he's in Carolina. So
Is he? I didn't know that. That's cool. Good for him.
yeah, so uh, the coaching last year was particularly rough there, and the usage element was not exactly ideal for most of the season because of the role he had to play. So there's a little bit of hope there that, at least for me, that maybe with a little bit less of a coverage element there, maybe a little bit more in terms of pass rushing, maybe even a little bit more in terms of edge setting, that maybe, just maybe with good coaching, we still the Texans linebacker coach to be our linebacker coach this year. I don't know if you're aware of that, Grayson. Uh, but maybe, just maybe, he can be better than he once was at his lowest points last year. So the other guy that we had to play a lot last year that is really kind of falling off in the minds of Lions fans is Jared Davis. Uh, Keelan, what are your thoughts about Jared Davis, specifically with the new coach? Well, I shouldn't even say coach, but coaching staff if you include Corey Unlin, and what his potential for development might be like, specifically with help mentoring wise from Jimmy Collins and even Reggie Ragland.
Right. And for me, Davis, I don't mind Davis. I like him down. He's a good run stopper, not a good cover guy. So that's really on passing downs. You're not going to want him in the game. That's something, Tavai and, Collins if you want him in a covered role rather than
Yeah, for
rushing the
sure,
passer.
Collins.
Yep. But, Davis, for a guy who's good against the run, I mean, is he worth, a first round pick looking back at it? He hasn't played like a first round pick. And I mean, have we decided on his 5th-year option? I
Yeah,
assume
we
we're gonna
declined it.
decline it. Yeah. I would like him back on a cheaper deal than what the 5th-year option would have been.
Right.
But yeah, to me, he's not really he's not going to be a 3-down linebacker.
Yeah, the biggest thing for him with the run defense was the holes, like recognizing. Yeah, he kind of almost in a way stuck to the play call a little bit too much, and he more so shot gap rather than played the patient game of waiting for the run to develop. So he was the guy who was like exploding through the hole. Like, say the run was called for a B gap run, like he would shoot through the A gap because that's where he was supposed to be, is the A gap, and then the running back would just slip right through the B gap and you have a wide open run lane to the second level.
Right.
So that was the biggest issue with Jared, is kind of lacking that patience, that anticipation, uh, and giving him a little bit less of that freedom to kind of pick and choose. He's a one gap shooter, which is why he's such a good blitzer. Is because he really explodes through that gap so well. He utilizes that athleticism. He's able to attack those rush lanes, but that also kind of hinders him and holds him back a little bit in terms of that run defense aspect. So, Grayson, what are your thoughts on Jared and maybe his potential with the team moving forward, and what you remember from him over the last couple of years?
Yeah, he is still, I believe still under 25, 26. Yeah, he's still young, former first round pick. You still hope something can change with him. But kind of like with Christian Jones that we were just talking about, you're going to want him close to the line of scrimmage. You're going to want to avoid him, getting mismatched with a tight end or a running back in coverage. But it is the difference between Christian Jones being, and it's not as simple as this, but Christian Jones is your run defense linebacker, and a guy like Gerard Davis can come in and be your pass, blitzing linebacker. But you can't just build a team with a whole bunch of niche linebackers. But could be upgraded, but could definitely be much worse in my opinion with Davis.
And yeah, I just looked up. He is 25, Grayson.
Okay.
Interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting point about rotating Christian Jared. I hadn't even thought about that myself. And that actually makes a little bit of sense when you think
Yeah.
about the potential impact of the next guy here on the radar, and Jelani Tavai. So maybe Jared and Christian Jones kind of rotating as that third linebacker alongside Collins and Tavai. That could be really interesting if you think about it that way. So yeah, let's talk a little bit more about Tavai. What are your thoughts, Keelan?
I like Tavai. He's, he didn't really get on the field as much last year. I believe, if I'm not, correct me if I'm wrong, but he dealt with some injuries last year.
The end of the year, he was on
Yeah.
IR. Yeah.
I
In
like
the
him.
beginning of the year, he was learning the system and
Right.
rookie, and yeah.
It's his second year now. He knows the system. He's a good cover linebacker. Maybe a bit of reach in the second round last year. Hopefully, he proves the doubters wrong, and I'm a fan of Tobias.
Yeah, the one thing that I noticed about Tavai myself was the one thing that the Pats defense really emphasizes is covering that middle of the field. And Tavai is really good in that zone coverage. He doesn't really have the range to play man or match up with a running back like a C-Mac. You don't want to put him on a C-Mac Carolina game. You don't really want to put him on a tight end against more of those higher end uh, tight ends either. For example, like Travis Kelsey or George Kittle or whoever. Fortunately, we don't play either of them this year. Uh, but in terms of that zone coverage, you can kind of take away that area between the hashes and that intermediate part of the field, those slant routes that tend to burn man coverage quite a bit that we like to play. He'll be really useful in that type of role. Also, not the most athletic guy, but he does have the discipline and the mental traits to be able to run spy. As we saw a little bit toward the end of the last season before he got hurt, kind of played that close to the line spy role, delay blitz type of thing. We saw that even a little bit against Arizona. Uh, so he can kind of take on those types of responsibilities a little bit as well. Grayson, do you remember anything about Tobias prospect or even last year?
Just kind of what you were saying right now, where he's very athletic. I think he's got the athleticism necessary, but he isn't going to be, very explosive for you. He's if he gets stuck behind, he's not going to make up the distance. But he is definitely. I'd be comfortable with him, you know, being in space as long as he's behind your behind the offense. He's not going to catch up to anyone. But I do think he's got higher upside than we were just talking about with Gerard Davis or Christian Jones. That second round, like Keilan said, was probably a reach. But I'd be very comfortable with him, in a backup role, coming in, even playing some meaningful snaps. I think he could definitely be a lot worse as well.
Nice. So a couple of depth linebackers just to hit on real quick. Jalen Reeves may be more of a special teams guy. If someone were to get hurt, he can come in a little bit as well. Reggie Ragland, the Super Bowl champion from the Kansas City Chiefs, kind of adds that uh, culture vibe a little bit as well. Maybe be more of a backup type to these two in particular in the middle of the field. Kaminda and Lee, mainly special teams guys. Lil probably being active for the most part as well. Kaminda actually is a fullback now, so that's unfortunate that they have him mislisted. Uh, but yeah, he's going to be more of a special teams guy anyway. So finally, on the defensive side, we have my favorite part of probably the entire team outside Matthew Stafford in the secondary.
Oh yeah.
Really, really big fan of this group. And definitely love the upside for pretty much every single player on this entire unit. Desmond Trufant is Pro Bowl caliber corner from Atlanta at his ceiling. Justin Coleman, we saw what he can do at his best the first 4 weeks of the year last year. He was Defensive Player of the Year caliber the first 4 weeks of the season. Just absolutely incredible start to his season last year. Jeff Okuda, obviously number 3 pick in this year's draft, lockdown, shutdown corner at his ceiling. It might take him a little bit of time to kind of develop that into the system, and obviously with the COVID year being held back a little bit. Amani Oruwariye flashed big time last year. I was a huge fan of coming out. I had like a first round grade on him, I think,
Yeah,
before
so
he
did
fell
I.
all the way to the fifth last year, and he really showed out. He was our best cover guy last year, aside from Tracy Walker. Definitely love his potential and upside to start in that CB2 role. And speaking of Tracy Walker, he's probably our best player on the team outside of Trey Flowers and Matthew Stafford. Just absolutely fun to watch him. His tape is fantastic. Huge fan of his game. Probably my favorite player on the team, again, outside of staff. Uh, so definitely love his upside there. Unfortunately, him and Flowers are flipped too. Him and Harmon are flipped, so that's kind of unfortunate. Harmon really going to be that big time over the top guy for us, that bracket coverage guy if we need to double team someone. Really take away that deep shot over the top of the defense if someone were to get burned. Last year, our over the top safety was, I want to say it was Tavon Wilson. Played back there quite a bit. I think even Tracy Walker played over the top a little bit last year, a little bit more than he probably should be. So getting that true single high kind of guy in Deron Harmon is going to be incredibly helpful to this defense, especially one who has that communication and leadership aspect that Deron Harmon has. Will Harris, elite athlete who can really match up against those tight ends specifically. Uh, let me see a little bit more of the technical development there. But he has the size and the athleticism to be able to really take away those tight ends at his ceiling potential. Even Tony McRae, Daryl Roberts flashed a little bit with New York, McRae a little bit with Cincinnati. Both more special teams guys because of the depth we have up top. But if they need to come in, they can. In a situation in which those four guys all get hurt, Miles Killebrew, even a little bit in terms of linebacker coverage, can probably take away some of those tight ends. CJ Moore, even a little bit, has some coverage potential in an emergency situation in which he needs to come in as safety 3 or safety 2. So, absolutely love this secondary. It's definitely going to be a big part of what we're able to do on defense this year.
Right.
So, Grayson, I'll let you kind of counter that and give your thoughts because you're probably a little bit lower on these guys than I am. Kind
Good
of
thing we have
visualize that
7 minutes
a little
until
bit.
this ends.
Yeah, so with the secondary, it isn't ideal for me to have to lean on Jeff Okuda early in the year, like I think they might have to. Kind of like
though.
we were. What was that?
You
Oh,
have Monty
yes.
starting.
Yes, but I mean, just you're still going to want to play him, and like I was saying earlier with Swift, rookies worry me, and I think Okuda will be fantastic. I think he'll be a top 10 corner. He's going to be great. But it's one thing I'm especially looking forward to. This Sunday for the Bears game is seeing how he does. And that's not even as a Bears fan how they attack him, but just he's the third overall pick. He's exciting to watch. I do worry about Desmond Trufant and Coleman. I don't think they're much better than average, if average. There's a reason Atlanta was okay letting Trufant go. Tracy Walker is interesting to me. I hear how often you guys talk about him, and he could easily be from the outside, like outsider like me, a positive or a negative. The past few years with the Bears, I've talked about guys like Adrian Amos, Kyle Fuller, about how great they are, and they didn't get a lot of respect. And now we're looking back a couple of years, and they're both pretty well respected guys at their positions. And nobody knows a team like their fans. And I think this will be a good year for Tracy Walker to see if what you guys are seeing is that bias, or if he's really going to step up as potential top 10 safety, top 15 safety.
Yep.
I do think this unit has a lot of upside, has a lot of potential, but it is worrying. I would be worrisome about it this season.
Interesting. So would it make you feel any better if I told you that Coleman was the nickel?
See, no, I knew he was the nickel.
Okay.
And I love my nickel corners. I just finished up with Bryce Callahan. Love that guy. On Chicago to Buster Screen, total bummer there. I understand the importance, if that means anything. And I don't think he is, even as a nickel corner, you're only going to see him in those subsets. A lot of teams run their nickel now, though, so he'll be out there a good amount of time, in my opinion. I would, I'm going to obviously probably be more comfortable with him than some of the other guys, just because, a veteran, stuff like that. But I look forward to this unit in the future. But even now, there's a lot of slot receivers that I would take over Justin Coleman in a nickel defense.
Interesting. So going a little bit towards sticking with the Coleman theme, what are your thoughts about how he matches up against the division? How does he match up against the Bears slot? How does he match up against the Vikings slot, who is not Jefferson, but the other guy? And how does he match up against the Packers slot, whoever that is?
So, the Bears wide receivers outside of Allen Robinson are absolutely miserable. So he should be fine against the Bears, isn't it? Correct me if I'm wrong, but if I remember correctly, Thielen came out of the slot a good amount while Diggs was outside, unless it was swapped. I could be wrong.
They flip-flopped, and then they had another guy, Chad Beebe, come out of the slot every once in a while, too.
Oh, yeah. DC Johnson, or whatever his name is.
But yeah, if the Vikings decide to put Thielen in the slot, I would be very uncomfortable watching it as a Lions fan. But I think compared to, I guess, if you look at the intra-division games, I don't think there's a lot of elite slot wide receivers, which I guess could help, the Lions in the long run. but I think in general, you're going to be trying to look for an upgrade there eventually. Not saying, it needs to happen right now. Not saying he's, the absolute worst corner possible right there or anything. But I do think he will be quickly passed up by Amani and Okuda, not for the slot role, but just, as a talent perspective.
Oh yeah, I honestly think Okuda is probably at his ceiling already past him. And from what we saw with Money last year, yeah, I definitely could agree with you on that. So we have about a couple minutes left here. What do you think about Amani as our cornerback two to start off the year, based on what you saw from him last year and at Penn State?
Yeah, so he had, as good a year as you could ever expect from a fifth round coming in like that.
Yep.
I'm not saying he was locked down. I'm not saying anything, but to be thrown into the fire and hold your own is definitely something I'd be excited for moving forward with him.
Nice. So, Keilan, we have about 2 minutes left for you to give your kind of thoughts on the rest of the secondary that you weren't able
Perfect.
to so far.
Right. So, obviously, I'm pretty high on the cornerback class. Okuda, one of my favorite guys. I'm an Ohio State fan. He's immediately my favorite player in the NFL. He's my favorite player in college. One of the best prospects I've watched, especially as a cornerback. Coleman, he had an elite first half of the season, and then, the season started to go downhill. Stafford got hurt. His team started to, I guess, tank a bit without Stafford. So,
And
I
then the loss of
think,
Tracy also, in particular, was
right.
not good. That kind of hindered him a little bit, having that guy behind him.
Yeah. I mean, I think pretty much the entire team went downhill. I mean, I think that was partially on purpose. We got the third overall selection. But, Amani as a rookie last year was awesome. He'll be our corner two. I think he'll be even better. And I'm trying to talk fast. Trufant, better than Slay, which is
An
good.
upgrade.
And obviously an upgrade. Yeah, and he was, not elite in Atlanta, but he wasn't horrible either. So, Tracy Harmon, I'm excited for that duo. Will Harris is a good safety three, and I'm gonna get cut off soon, so that's where I'm gonna leave that.
Nice. So yeah, definitely really like the secondary group as well. Really looking forward to seeing what they're able to do. And just really quickly on special teams before, I guess while this is cutting off and so on. Uh, Kicker is going to be Matt Prager. Nice returning veteran there. Established veteran. You know what you're going to get from him. Jack Fox is a little bit of an unknown at punter. Uh, a little bit of a younger guy there. Definitely looking forward to seeing if he's able to kind of fill the shoes of Sam Martin, who was one of the best punters in the league for a couple of years. And of course, the legendary Don Lubach at long snapper as well. Just give this team a little bit more of that veteran leadership and captaincy experience. Main return guys this year are going to be Jamal Agnew, of course, the only player in the league last year to have a punt and kick return touchdown, as well as Dingy Amendola, Ty Johnson, Marvin Hall probably get some reps there as well. He's a receiver depth. Didn't really talk about him, unfortunately, all that much with the offensive side. But yeah, so it'll be really interesting to see. Maybe Quinta, I don't know about Cephas. But yeah, really just Hall, Amendola, and Ty Johnson is kind of those primary backups there at returner. So, with that said, here's a couple of guys that are on IR and PUP that we did not go over. Austin Bryant's on PUP to start the year. He'll miss the first, I think, 6 weeks. Nick Bowden is going to be on season-ending IR. He got put on IR before cut day. Mike Ford is on 3-week IR, as is Bo Scarborough. Jayshon Cornell, who was our 7th rounder this year, is on the injured reserve list for the entire year. He also is put on IR before the end of the year, or before the end of preseason. And then J-Ron Curse, who unfortunately didn't get the chance to talk about with Keilan and Grayson, is also going to be on that suspension list. So he will miss the first 3 weeks of the season versus the Bears, versus the Packers, and versus the Cardinals before returning in week 4. So with that said, there is our two-part look at the depth chart of the Lions this season. Beyond offensive line, just I guess really quick, I can go over that myself. Taylor Decker starting left tackle, Joe Dahl starting left guard, Frank Ragnow starting center, Jimmy Jackson will be starting over Ode Ibushi most likely at right guard, and Hal Vaitai at right tackle. Backups include our fourth round pick this year, Logan Stenberg. Matt Nelson was kind of a surprise in terms of making the roster, in terms of mainstream media there. He will probably be the fourth left tackle behind Tyrell Crosby, and then Ode Bushi at backup guard. So, with that said, hopefully you guys enjoyed the first two parts of this series. For those of you guys who want to check out the offensive side, we already covered that on part one. But for now, hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day, and join us for part three. Peace out.